All right, so here we are. This is what I meant by the channel's basically gonna have a little bit of variety here, y'all. So like my main thing is that we're basically gonna be reacting to Asmongold's video on why Gen Z is so poor. Me myself, I'm more of a millennial because I was born in 1995. So because of that, I am pretty much just interested in what Asmon has to say about this video. The things we'll be doing in this video is pretty much just reacting to what he says and also going through and essentially just seeing what we can draw as like a contradiction through it. So we won't go through the whole thing, but it'll be a good like 20-30 minute video. We'll basically just give our thoughts based on what Asmon says and what this video presents. I'm particularly fond of Asmon because you know he has a good channel and everything. I like his thoughts on a lot of things when it comes to certain videos. But I definitely want to see how we can kind of gauge like one person's perspective versus another. So without further ado, we're just gonna hop right in and get it. We're gonna see what Asmon has to say. We're gonna give our thoughts too. So welcome to the channel. Make sure you subscribe, like, leave your comments down below, and we will get right into it.
Brains.
Almost everywhere online, you'll notice videos, articles, and news clips talking about Gen Z becoming poorer. And we've even done so on this channel before too. But oftentimes, you'll see people say it's because Gen Z are lazy, entitled, and not having enough children or families.
I feel like they said the same thing about millennials whenever we were the same age as Gen Z. Am I crazy? Because that's what I remember.
Population collapse looming over
I
the
mean,
horizon.
essentially, I kind of remember that. But, like, if we're about the same age, which I think I am around the same age as Asmon, I mean, it wasn't the same exactly. I mean, they just said we had it better off than they did back then because they would be going to school, like, what, like 500 miles through the snow and some shit. So, like, really, I mean, it's similar, but it's definitely a little bit more heightened nowadays due to, like, how things are in the world and obviously the pay that people get and the prices of shit. So like really it's a little bit different, but I see the correlation he's drawing here.
Warn about what's to come when there just aren't enough children to sustain the coming future. Is this
Well, we won't need children, we'll have robots.
Just because Generation Z supposedly wastes all their money on morning Starbucks and owning an iPhone? Well, it doesn't take long to realize that this is far from the truth, and is merely a band-aid type reasoning over the massive gaping wound causing Generation Z to become so much poorer than other generations. Jesus. So are Generation Z, an entire generation of people around the West, just really that lazy if they physically can't work more than 12 hours a day to sustain a life? How is it that in the past, you could really just get a job through an ad in the local paper on only a high school diploma, and by living off a regular normal salary, you could have a big house, a stay-at-home wife, with 3 children, all sustained by just one salary at your normal job?
Alright, before he even goes off on this, I'm gonna give my input. The reason for that, in all honesty, is because of the way the times were back then. One, you didn't have like everybody trying to go for the same job. 2, if jobs were being created, they were a little bit newer back then. And then 3, the cost of everything was so low compared to what you were earning that like you could literally work any job almost in the world, make an income, be able to afford certain things, and then basically go on to have a family and own a home or two. But nowadays, that's just not how it is. Nowadays, you pretty much got to end up working a couple jobs, if not get lucky and find that one high paying job just to be able to actually be able to afford maybe even half of that if on your own with somebody else. So that's kind of one of the reasons as to why things are so different now versus then. I kind of hope we do course correct sometime in this world, but like that's also something that's not very foreseeable, if you will, because at the end of the day, we still do have just a lot of things at the moment that are a little bit out of our control, like the price of homes, the inflation prices that have gone up. So really, it's like those factors right there kind of lead to the whole thing of why we can't do things the way people used to. And to be honest with you, I mean, I'm a fan of higher wages, but at the end of the day, the higher wages are just essentially going to end up really making it so things are a little bit more expensive anyways, or companies will essentially charge more. So like I don't really know, but like I mean the answer to this, I'd love to hear Asmon's reply on it, but I mean that's just my take. So
That's crazy. Like that's the thing that I feel like most people are mad about, is the fact that they can look at these old movies and these old shows and it can be like some dumb fuck husband who, like, what does he do? Like, he goes to work and he works on an assembly line and he has a house, 2 cars, and a boat. What the hell?
to this giant disparity in such a short time span where people can barely survive today, where the living conditions have become so much worse? Why does it appear that to live a normal life now is just so out of reach for most in Generation Z? And what effect will this have on the future? Well, to better understand this whole situation, we need to go back in time to compare the life of a regular person to someone today.
1950.
In the past, for other generations, higher education was a sure way of moving upwards in the social structure. However, today, this is just becoming more and more of a financial black hole.
How many of you guys know somebody who is basically like they have a bunch of student aid debt, and like they can't get out from under it? Because I know a lot of people that are like that.
Yeah, and he brings up a good point there, because what I'm really feeling about that is that college nowadays really doesn't help you get the job you're going for. I can give you guys my own little personal take. So I went to a community college, which already bad news first off, for graphic design. Now, the jobs were there, but they weren't paying exactly what you would want. So at the end of the day, you could make just as much being like a manager somewhere else. But even on top of that, just the actual ideal job that you would have wanted from this college in general, it pretty much just came down to the fact that like it wasn't exactly what would help you essentially pay off your debt. So it's not that it has to help you pay off your debt, but if it even has the promise of being a high enough salary to the point where you could pay it off in X amount of years, it's more of an understandable trade-off. But because that's just not the case anymore, and because the job market is so saturated with people going in, essentially, I just feel like college doesn't really work anymore unless you go for a specific trade that literally ends up getting you into a specific job. And that's what people kind of do with college, expecting to go into something like, I don't know, criminal justice, and then being like one of the best lawyers out there while not understanding the work that comes with it, and then also the ups and downs of that field. So at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, I know people that are in college debt, but that's only because, I mean, we've had this whole thing in our world where we've just been told like, hey, like go to school and you'll pretty much be promised a, you know, career and a house and all that on top of it. But that's just not the way the world works anymore. So I definitely feel him on when he says, how many people do you know are in college debt? Because there's so many people in college debt without even a job to show for, that it just really makes it so the actual point of going to college nowadays, unless there's a job guarantee behind the fact, is just kind of pointless. So
especially like, I mean, now not as many, right? Because like a lot of my friends have gotten jobs and shit like that, and they've been able to pay it off. But for a long time, that was the case.
Which has doubled the amount that students will have to pay in the last 20 years, has completely exploded.
Yeah.
If we count that with inflation, the tuition for public colleges in the US has jumped by more than 213% compared to the 1980s. Baby boomers would pay about $10,000 converted with inflation to 2018, but Generation Z now at the very minimum is paying $25,910.
Oh my god. And that's only in 2020. Look at that to 2021. So it's probably even more than that now.
Well into the six-figure range, as this number also excludes rentals, administration fees, stationery, and food, which is why there's such crippling debt all over America for students right now. And even if you do get the best grades and scholarships possible, many Generation Z students are still required to take on these huge predatory loans. Loans that stay with you even if you go bankrupt. And so
I think the big problem with student loans is the fact that I think that it's grooming. Because like students are brought up and people are brought up to think that you need to go to college, and you're in an institution that for 12 years institutionalizes you into believing that you need to go to college. And so it's like you're basically trying to brainwash somebody for 12 years to take on indentured servitude for life. And some people are able to like overcome it, some aren't. But the reason why I think that they're unethical is the fact that you're doing it to a person who is underage and can't really consent to a contract and doesn't really understand these different types of like amount of money.
And he was essentially right about that. I mean, the whole thing about it is like, what are we told by parents? Like to go to college after high school, get into a good career. And sometimes that's just not the case of what happens. Obviously, because I mean, we also got to look at this aspect of it, whether you guys are watching me or Asmon. People can straight up just nowadays go online, talk about whatever subjects they want, and then pretty much be making more than the average doctor almost, depending on their status. So this is a fact that Asmon has definitely laid out, and I think that it's a shame that we do this to people that are younger, because with people that are younger, essentially, you really have this thing where like you can't really get a young person to fathom the debt they'll get into, because they're more looking at the career and giving themselves that promise of hope that pretty much will essentially not ensure, but guarantee them a way into, I guess you could say, being I don't know, being like able to pay off the debt, become rich, have this dream job, and like we all want that. I mean, there's so many people in America that at this point, I mean, like that's just like what the ultimate dream is for everyone, whether you go to college or not. But just to prey on people that are younger and pretty much guarantee them an actual success rate when a lot of them don't get it, it's just crazy. And I think the cost of college should come down, just because of the fact that like if you're not going to get into a high paying career, I think the career to salary ratio should be based off of that. And then the tuition for that should be basically, you know, accounted for based on like how the actual job would pay. So let's say you go to be an electrician, right? If you go to be an electrician, you go to a trade school, and an electrician's only making anywhere from starting out 50 to under 50K, depending on how good they are and how much business they get. I think college should personally be a fraction of that cost up front and throughout to tuition, because that's how much you're basically going to be making within the couple years. So let's say you make like 50K starting out as an electrician after you go to trade school. Okay, the tuition for that school should personally be only anywhere from like I'd say 15 to maybe even 8K. I know that's pretty low, but at the end of the day, we got to understand that even though college is a business, people have to make the money in order to pay back these colleges. That way, so the business can keep flowing and people keep coming in. But that's what I'm saying about how the job market's so saturated and people honestly are kind of in that loop. That at the end of the day, I think it's just something that is a shame to see young people actually get into, and then the promise on the other end just isn't held up. Also, we're on the 11-minute mark. Whether you're watching this or not, I'm just going to let you know I'm going to scroll ahead in this video because his video is personally about 56 minutes. So we're going to do every like 5 minute section here at about like, every 5 minutes that the video is going, because I don't want to keep you guys too long. I'm not trying to make that long of content yet because obviously I want to draw on the viewership. Again, if you can, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe. I also would like to see your comments in the video below. But we are going to skip ahead and kind of see what other parts of this video we can kind of draw our opinion and basis on.
No, why not? Why? Body type, but yes.
Okay, a little bit forward.
Applicants must tailor their CVs to each job posting, mimicking keywords and avoiding formatting issues that could confuse ATS software. This tedious process leaves many feeling demoralized, especially when rejection emails just become normal, and yet at the same time you see on social media all of these rich millionaires living it up in places like Dubai.
I mean, if you see a girl living it up in Dubai, anyway.
All right.
So I do think that the pervasiveness of influencer culture has absolutely caused way more resentment. Because like now somebody can go, like they can go and they can see some girl on Instagram or on Twitch, right? They can see somebody and they're like, wow, this person has everything that I want. And they just sit there and talk to a camera all day. And like that, like just face value unfairness makes people so angry.
Well, I mean, you got to think about it. Okay, now this is a point I would love to get my perspective on. Okay, he mentions that, but let's all take a step back. My thing about that is you do got to understand people at least have a right to be. I mean, I know I'm doing that with you guys right now. Obviously, I'm starting my journey with this whole video. But the whole thing about that is that you have to respect and understand the average person. The average person is working 40 hours a week at a job that barely pays the bills. If you are able to sit at home and draw a viewership that is going to draw you, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, essentially for talking to people and everything else, one, you have to count yourself as very blessed, and two, you have to be understanding of the situation that people come from. Like, in my opinion, I personally do a little bit of transportation work myself. But at the same time, I also have to say that because of that, I understand the actual value of if someone's working 40 hours a week at an actual job that requires physical work versus someone that is online. I think, honestly, that's where we kind of have it messed up in this country. Now, do I think you should be able to earn money online by actually growing your viewership and everything else if that's how the internet allows? Of course. But I think what it should be, in my opinion, should be, okay, if you're a top content creator like Asmongold here, I think you should personally be able to bring in like maybe 100 to, I want to say like 350. I don't even know if 350 sounds like a reasonable number, but anywhere around the $100,000 six-figure range, depending on your viewership and also what you do personally with your video content. And I think that should be around the cap for there. And the reason why is because we have to understand that, like, the more people get the idea that they can go online and make money, the more people are going to, if they don't become successful at it, become jealous of the fact that they're not making this money and they're busting their butt every week and they're barely able to make it by. Whereas, like, essentially, if you are talking on a camera like this, like we are, essentially you're sitting there and you're not being shortcutted because you could put in the work too and pretty much get those videos out there and grow your base and everything like that. But you still have to understand at the end of the day that comes from the fact that doing that and then knowing that you could have worked a regular job that was supposed to pay you etc amount and promise these like benefits and etc, that's where the distinction comes from somebody that can go online and post whatever and make X amount of money versus somebody that's actually going out of their home working a physical job and then having to repeat over and over again is essentially getting the low end deal of what would be called I would say a fair working wage. So like again, in my opinion, I think like streamers and everybody that posts online, maybe you could make a max of like 100K depending on your content type, even more depending on like if you're at Mr. Beast level, right? Okay. But if you're someone that's working an actual physical job, I think you should, if not be making close to that kind of salary, more, because at the end of the day, if you're somebody that's feeding into the economy and the way America works, there's no reason that you should be worrying about bills or having to essentially basically sit there and be making less than somebody that can essentially post whatever online, make X amount of money from the viewership on that video alone only because of their viewer count, etc. So that is my personal ploy with what he said, and I do think that people are valid in their reason for thinking that. But I do think also that a lot of people don't want to put in the work, which kind of leads to the whole thing of like, hey, like if you are essentially not able to make this much money or do this certain thing which allows you to, you have to look at the reasons why and really try to overcome them or just keep pushing past them until the day that you get lucky comes. If that doesn't come, some of us get lucky, some of us don't. I don't know if this will work personally. I'm giving it my best shot. I'm here to basically, entertain, talk with you guys, hear what you have to say in the comments, and give my perspective as someone who obviously is like an everyday working person, just like everyone else out there. But would I like this to be my full-time job? Of course. I would love to do things that are like reacting to certain videos and, gameplay and other things with you guys. But right now we're just on the beginning, and I just wanted to at least give my reaction to that. But I've been going on long enough. Let's let Asmongold keep going.
Use of ATS, the hiring process remains overwhelmed. AI is making these systems that much more sophisticated, allowing companies to further automate hiring while removing human judgment. This efficiency-driven approach reduces applicants to mere data points, stripping away opportunities for personal connections. The result is a hiring landscape that feels impersonal and unfair. While job hunting has always been challenging, the rise of automation heightened competition, and unrealistic standards have made it far more dehumanizing. Before, you were given an opportunity to have an interview face-to-face to at least give the employer a good impression. This is now only merited if you're selected for an interview.
I remember I went to an interview and I couldn't figure out how to open the door to leave the interview room. And I drove home and I was thinking about how embarrassing that was. And then I realized that night, Mrs. Pandaria came out. And I was thinking then, I was like, I'm not going to have to work during the expansion.
Okay. Alright, Asmon, alright.
Data is the deciding factor amongst all, and any good explanations for any shortfalls in your CV fall through the cracks and are shifted to the rejected pile. There's even systems now that only pick up on certain words which might keep your application in the run, but again the competition is fierce. Even the format of your CV can count against you if their automated system is unable to read it. Then there's the problem with advertising jobs that are just no longer active.
I think by the way, I don't know if that's completely an AI problem. Like growing up, I don't know about you guys, but did you guys ever get like advice on like resume building and like CV building that it's like, oh, you don't want to do it like this because now hiring managers won't look at CVs that are like, written in this way?
I never did.
I feel like what they're really doing is they're automating something that was stupid to begin with, right? It's like it was already stupid and now it's being automated and the automated way is also stupid. But I feel like it's always been like this to an extent. But like now, since it's like a robot doing it, it feels a lot worse rather than it just being a person being biased. It's all bullshit. Yeah, yeah. It's like, it's basically, it's really efficient at being stupid, so it's stupid more often, so people are more mad.
I guess
Company
so.
policy, while they already have an applicant in mind, they still have to advertise. Or perhaps they fill the position but don't take the advert down. And if by chance you do get selected, you'll then be subjected to a questionnaire designed to gauge your submission to authority. As companies now want to hire people who will not challenge their expectations and restrictions.
That's right. You have to hire, you don't want to hire employees, you want to hire prospective slaves. That's what you want. I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, do you want somebody who's going to question authority? No.
And if this couldn't get any worse for Generation Z,
I think that definitely makes sense. I would say that's definitely fair on the basis of, like, no one wants to work with someone who's not going to be a team player. So at the end of the day, I mean, every company has the right to do that. Should they take down the job posting if obviously the position isn't available anymore, even though they have to advertise? Yes, they should, but at the end of the day, if they're required to, we have to understand that every company has to go by a certain set of rules, and you have to respect those rules if you plan to get in with them, or if you plan to at least play the game without a negative perspective and make it so you always have that losing mindset. So
it seems like AI is looming in the distance to replace many jobs.
Well, it's also that AI is going to be replacing the jobs that young people would be taking over, because they would be the least skilled and least informed or educated decisions.
If it couldn't get any worse, Generation Z is one of the first generations to have been weakened on all fronts, bombarded with estrogenic chemicals from plastics, junk food, and sedentary lifestyle.
They're making the kids gay by eating them McDonald's.
Okay.
They're making them gay with their brain don't work. Soy boys, yeah.
Oh my god, this comes from the guy who I have definitely seen eating a lot of McDonald's. I love you, Asmon, but you're funny.
Making Generation Z one of the weakest, less energetic...
I'm wrong, I like my McDouble sometimes too, but
shit. There is some hope, and that would be NMN. That's nicotinamide mononucleotide, a derivative of the B vitamin niacin, which is known to dramatically improve health and longevity by...
Alright, this is definitely an ad, so we are going to skip to... I don't like this 56 minutes. We're gonna go to about... right here.
Alright. You afford a house if the monthly payments were 30% of your monthly income. However, today this isn't really that possible. Most end up with 50%, leaving little money left to even survive.
I mean, like,
that's true.
How much is your rent payment? Like, I feel like most people...
Alright, now I'm gonna let y'all know for a little bit of transparency with my job and obviously not YouTube revenue at the moment. I would say my mortgage is probably... I want to say like 1/4, so 25%, and that's not even with my girlfriend who's soon to be moving in. Probably gonna drop to anywhere from like 15 to 20%, and I don't even know if it's gonna be that much. So depends on your situation. Some are luckier than others, but at the end of the day, I definitely think that owning a home now is obviously expensive because the prices have gone up, and then even on top of that, it's just the way it is. I mean, especially with wages not keeping up with them, so...
People's rent payment's probably like 2.5, 3.5, somewhere around there, right? So, like, if it's 30%, like, let's say it's 2.5. So if it's 30%, so that'd be basically times 3. So it'd be a little bit more than like 7,500 to like 8,000, right? In between that range. 8,000 times 12 is what's that? 96,000. And so you've got to be at 6 figures there for it to be 30% of your income, and that's for a cheap ass fucking house.
House also
and
comes
that's after taxes. True, real. That's take home. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the numbers.
On the house and the responsibility of fixing anything that needs fixing, along with
now, if you guys are curious, real quick, because I thought this is interesting, maybe a little breakdown of Asmon's chat. I just want to put this in here because it's kind of interesting to see the different dynamics that come from everybody's living situation. So let me just give you guys a little insight. So when Asmon asked that, some dude said, "I spend 50%." Let's keep going.
1,000 times.
One dude said 3,200. One dude said 1,400. Sorry, for a studio apartment in Austin. Let me mute this now so we can kind of go through. $1,700 one dude said. Another dude said $8,500. Don't know where the fuck he lives, but okay. One dude said $2,300. We have more people in the chat saying, let's see, 1,600, almost 25%. 900. One guy said for a 1 bedroom he pays 1K, even pretty much. Another dude said my mortgage is 700 on a 115K house valued at 280K now. And you have another dude that says his mortgage is $1,100 for a 3 bedroom ranch bought in 2020. So it's kind of like, depending on the location, you really have to find that sweet deal. But at the end of the day, you really can, essentially find something that could work for you depending on, your luck and the location and everything. But we see that there's a bunch of ranges here, so.
Fixing anything that needs fixing. Along with
but hey, boys, hey, guys, keep in mind, it's TikTok. It's the Chinese government. They're the ones that are the problem. The Chinese, they're the ones that make us hate America. That's what we need to fix. We get rid of TikTok, all this stuff's going to go away.
Okay.
Bunch of taxes added on, and as the population exploded, so too did the demand for houses, making this a seller's market, eliminating most normal people's options of buying a home until they're at least 50 years old, leaving them paying rental costs for someone else or never having anything to show for it. Landlords.
To be fair, there is, like, if you want to get into the economics of it, there are economic outcomes that result in renting being a more financially efficient option than owning a home. That is true, but the people that have that level of financial literacy probably don't have this issue to begin with.
I mean, let's take a second there. So having financial literacy with that is literally simple if you all want the cheat code. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. So if your house or mortgage is essentially like, let's say like 15K, or not 15K, 1,500 a week, and you go to rent somewhere in the meantime, so you can save up more money while trying to get your next home, you obviously wouldn't rent anywhere that's charging over 1,500. If you couldn't find it, you would essentially stay where you're at until the market drops, or you would essentially move back in with family until you could find a suitable home where the mortgage payment monthly would be, around the same or whatever works within your budget for a monthly payment. So it's really not hard to get a monthly payment and be financially literate on a rental versus a mortgage property. The main thing with a mortgage is you're going to need more of that money up front for the down payment, insurance, and etc. But if you have that, and essentially you can figure out your monthly payments that are going to be associated with that mortgage, then essentially you could decide right then and there whether you'd rather rent or own. But essentially the good part about owning is as your property goes up and you want to one day sell that, at least you'll have that whole sum based on how much you've paid off or the complete paid off value to add to your, your finances and use for whatever, whether that's getting the next house, saving up for other certain things, or whatever. So it's really not hard to dictate the financial literacy between wanting to rent a place versus owning one. You just have to pick, and obviously the rent can't be more than the mortgage if you don't have all the money up front for everything that comes with the mortgage. So there you go.
Education, like they just don't.
They don't. Some people don't, but it's really not that hard.
So many potential occupants, they don't need to keep rental costs low. Even renting now comes with a list of add-on fees that most Gen Z just don't take into account, leading to people sharing homes in an attempt to afford them but still not making ends meet. And it's hardly a surprise. I mean, the average rent in places like New York alone is $4,000 a month.
But let's be honest, if you choose to live in Manhattan, you are choosing to live somewhere where that budget makes no sense. Like, I get you want to live in the city, but why in the world wouldn't you just move somewhere outside the city, do the commute if your job's going to be there, or if essentially you just want to live there because it's the city, and then have a cheaper way of living, drive yourself into the city, have all the same perks, and still have money to save. Like, I don't understand how people want to go into the city and pay $4,000 a month to literally live in a box where literally you essentially don't get anything besides the ability to walk, increase crime, and essentially just like maybe nightlife, but even then you're spending money on nightlife, so your budget's even tighter because now you don't have money to spend for anything else besides maybe your occasional weekend go out and then your rent. And that's not even including if the electric and water's included. So literally living in the city to me makes no sense even if you're rich, because the only reason you do it if you're rich is for one, a flex, and two, if like you essentially really want to live in the city, like that's your actual thing. But at the end of the day, the money you can save just by living outside the city and then coming in based off of a commute of however many minutes or hours you need to get there just doesn't make sense to me.
And that's without the bills and water costs.
Yeah, I remember, I think Rich was telling me back whenever like we were doing the shit back in the day, like 4 years ago, he told me that like his rent at his apartment in New York City was like $15K or something like that.
That's ridiculous.
Like it's insane.
All right, we're gonna go ahead from here. Probably right to about here. We're hitting the 30-minute mark, so I want to wrap this up for you guys in about the next 10 minutes or so.
Do they know? Uh-oh.
When people say generation are just more lazy than other previous generations, there's a lot more to this than it first seems. It's not laziness to have a coffee and an iPhone, or to not care about your job if you can't even afford to survive. This isn't to do with laziness and apathy, but more so the fact that there's no reason to care anymore. It's why employee confidence, morale, and birth rates are declining across the globe. And amongst everyone...
I think that also this is going to be a meta level. I think that you have lost a spiritual connection. I think religion used to be I hate to say it, I agree with Karl Marx. It was an opiate for the people, and I think that a lot of people got a lot of value out of it. And whether you think that they should or not is irrelevant. I think that they did. And so you have that like people are no longer religious. They don't have communities anymore. There are no third spaces that people are a part of other than obviously work and, their house. And you have that happen. And big surprise, you have this cultural nihilism. It's inevitable that this was going to happen.
I mean, he's right.
Gen Z stands out with the lowest levels of worker engagement. Only 44% report job satisfaction compared to 67% of older workers, driving these trends you hear about in the news like quiet quitting and bare minimum Mondays. But this is more just a symptom of a much wider problem of broader societal discontent and stagnation. And as this happens, so too are the fertility rates dropping. The US recently reached a historic low of 1.62.
Okay, let me say this personally. I don't know if this is what y'all think, but this is my opinion on this specific topic right here. I was saying it yesterday on my own from work. Specifically, I feel like we're worrying about the birth rate of America when I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot of freaking people in this country already. Like, yeah, we want the generation to continue on, of course, but if it's not suitable for you to have a child because of one, finances and everything else, yeah, that comes from a relation that goes to jobs, but I don't think we have to worry about it to the point where it's like, okay, like we're not having like 20,000 babies every day, because if we were, then at least the birth rate of America would stay up. That's not what we need at all. What we need right now is to basically just, worry about the economy. Once that's better, then people can worry about having babies and being able to afford them and etc. And then we go from there. But this stuff about the birth rate in the United States, like I get it, but I definitely, at least from my experience and how many people I see on a daily basis, depending on what days I work, have seen plenty of people all around the country, and trust me, we are pretty much good right now in the amount of people we have. If people make babies in the next 10 to 20 years or so, I think essentially we're going to be just fine. But worrying about how many people are having children based off of how many were having children, to be honest with you, that's just such an irrelevant factor to me that it doesn't really matter. Like we'll always have a country that's going to be plentiful of citizens and people that live here, that it really doesn't matter how much the birth rate has dropped. Now if it got drastic, like that number went to less than 0.5%, then we got a problem maybe. But even then, we're good right now. We essentially have enough people in this country to keep the economy flowing. you know, all that stuff. So it's just like we don't really need to worry about the whole thing with people and you know, the birth rate, at least in my opinion.
Per woman, far below the 2.1 needed to sustain a stable population. And
Because
understanding these two interconnected trends reveals a much bigger generational and economic shift. The same sort of boring soulless corporate work no longer connects with Generation Z, especially when they can't even afford to live properly, causing 60%
I think people would be glad to sit in this cubicle if they were getting paid $200,000 a year. That's the problem, is that people are not being paid an amount of money that they feel like is worth investing their life into doing this thing.
Of course.
So, like, that's the reason. It's all about the money. Like, there's a reason, like, those guys that work out in the oil rig, they're getting paid a lot of fucking money. And that's why, and it's risky. It's brutal, right? But they're getting paid crazy money.
US bosses to report terminating Generation Z employees for valuing flexible schedules and higher pay. And it's the same thing all around the West. Younger workers in the UK also feel so disengaged, with over 40% under 25 considering leaving their jobs due to burnout and a lack of career progression, which aligns perfectly with the broader cultural shift away from traditional life milestones, including starting families and having children. And how can society expect Generation Z to be having large, happy families when the cost of raising a child is approximately $300,000 by age 17? And that's excluding college and inflation driving this figure higher. In the UK, childcare consumes over 20% of household income, making parenthood increasingly unattainable and only for the rich, however dystopian that may seem. High student debt, stagnant wages, and unaffordable housing all compounds to this challenge, not only discouraging job satisfaction but also having a family. It's why only back in 2003, 83% of people expressed a desire to become parents. But today, that number has now dropped down to 51%.
That's crazy.
That is
That's
a little
like
crazy.
More than a 50% drop. Percentage-wise?
Percentage-wise, I mean, 83-51, it's only a 32% drop, which is significant. But you have to understand, like, we have people that want to, like, you know, basically not have to worry about a child, or they don't want to be obviously part of the norms when it comes to having a family. They just want to live their own life and be happy on their own. Or essentially they just don't want children because maybe they can't, or maybe they just don't, you know, essentially like buy into the whole thing of having a kid to feel fulfilled. But that's your own personal choice at the end of the day. Not everybody should be a parent. Me personally, I definitely want to have a kid. And my whole thing with that is just the fact that it's your own personal choice at the end of the day. And now that we have more freedom for people to choose and live the lifestyle that they want, whether it's because of finances or not, or just personal choice, it's just the fact that people are just doing what they want more nowadays. And if that comes down to it and people not wanting to, you know, have a family like that and have a kid, I think that's perfectly fine. I think we need to not worry about it. And at the end of the day, if you want to incentivize people to have more kids, you could do the finances at the end of the day. But a lot of people probably just made it based off of personal choice and how they've grown up so far. So I think that's definitely a good factor as to why it's dropped so much. So
that's nuts. We're almost 50%.
All right, so we're coming up. I know he does this graph at the end of the video, which is cool. So I think we're just gonna go from about, let's see, starts this chart thing at about 42. We'll pick up here at about, I guess we could let it run. Let's let it run.
Oh my God. OnlyFans? No, I don't think OnlyFans is the reason for this.
All of this is compounded to something much greater than just Generation Z. This isn't just about Generation Z being lazy or whatever that means. The economic impact of all of this is going to be significant. Fewer young people entering the workforce exacerbates labor shortages, already visible in aging societies like Japan, where nearly 30% of the population is over 65. This imbalance increases financial pressures on workers, inflates taxes, and reduces benefits, further destabilizing economies. Businesses then face shrinking consumer bases and rising costs, slowing growth and threatening long-term stability. Efforts to reverse these declines, including family incentives and generous parental leave policies in nations like...
Well, the reason why you can't pay people to have more kids is they think that giving somebody $1,000 to have a kid is going to offset the $300,000 cost, not to mention the other... Like the $300,000 is not the real cost, right? That's the cost that's on paper. You also have the opportunity cost. So a lot of times it's harder to advance in your career if you have kids. And this is especially true I bet if you're a woman. And so like, cause if you're having, like, let's say you have 4 kids, well, that's going to be like 2.5 years, maybe 2 years, maybe a little bit less, depending, right, on where you live, that you're out of commission, you're not working. So how are you going to be able to compete with people and maintain your position in the job market when you have to take that much time off? That's just it. Yeah, so like there's a huge other component to it as well.
Yeah, and he's right about that because if you end up having a kid, you really do have to understand what comes with it. And it's not just having a kid and, basically seeing that thing on TV where the family's all together and everybody's happy all the time and everything's going perfect. Like, there are ups and downs with having a child in general, and whether that's holding you back or the things that come with that kid medically or maybe what they choose to do in the future as they grow up. There are just certain, costs and responsibilities and actions that you'll have to take in order to manage you and your family's life. So at the end of the day, I definitely agree with Asman on this and the fact that like you got to understand that like having a kid is pretty much something that is a big responsibility and choice, and you should really only do it if you're prepared and you know yourself and that you're willing to take those ups and downs that may come with having one. So at the end of the day, I definitely think Asman's right on this, and taking that time off from even earning money can definitely make the on paper value increase depending on how much you're making, how much you're losing, how much you're spending. So yeah, and that $1,000, you got to think if you got $1,000 even for every year that your kid was alive under the age of 18, you would essentially get like 17, 18K, and compared to the 300,000 on paper that still costs on average, you're literally still left with over 250K worth of just expenses while having a child. Now, mind you, this isn't all in that same year. It's divided up by about like, I'd say anywhere around 10 to 7K yearly, depending on your actual expenses and things that happen. But essentially, yeah, you still are at the end of the day, gonna be paying a certain cost for having a child over the course that you actually do, have them. So
You lose on salary, work progression, and pension? Yeah. Not even true. This is wrong. You really think that having to leave work to have kids isn't going to affect a woman's probability of getting hired and advancing her career? If that's not true, then why are there so many lawsuits about it?
France, Japan, and Taiwan have seen limited success. Cultural and systemic barriers persist, emphasizing that financial support alone can't resolve these issues.
Yeah.
And Generation Z's emphasis on work-life balance, mental
No, it's
health.
because it's not enough money. They're trying to give you... It's like... They're giving you like nothing to get rid of it. It's like it's like 5% of what you need.
Yeah, he's right about that.
Has
He's
to
right.
be incorporated into policies and workplace strategies to foster greater engagement and address underlying challenges.
Exactly.
Because
and I think also the reason why people are upset about what I said is that there's been like there's a trend now where like everybody thinks that like because women like there's like was a gender pay gap and all this stuff. I think that men and women have a lot of advantages in life, but the issue is that I think people are so like they like just react negatively to hearing that, so they'll just immediately go and be like, no, they're lying, like that's not true, that's not how it is. But there are legitimate things that women do have a harder time with. Same with men.
That's true.
Exist.
Generation Z are not making it on their own, how could they ever afford to support a family? It's hard enough without even having kids, which is a terrible tragedy. To support a home for a family, with our current home-to-income ratio being around 6 to 8 years, sometimes even 14 in other Western countries. But for baby boomers back in 1988, this ratio was only 4 years, and historically US home prices were around 5 times the yearly income. Today the ratio has exceeded even the 2008 housing bubble, which is even worse in the UK where home-to-income ratios have been over 7 for a decade and recently just hit 9. The situation is spiraling out of control. So then how will this affect our future? Could this really be the start of a population collapse? Well,
it is, and it's inevitable, and that's what it's designed to do. This is working as intended. The population collapse will be a intended consequence of the amount of automation and technology that will replace the people that don't have access to the means of production. This is working as intended.
I mean, I don't like doubt what he says is true. Just to wrap up the video here, I'm gonna give my quick consensus on that. So I don't think that we intended for everything to collapse. I think it's just that the expenses they came from what we know as like expenses from around the world to maybe how people have essentially grown in this country to do certain things has essentially led us to a point where you obviously have the disparities growing at a bigger margin, and that makes it so now, like when we obviously have this big gap in housing versus the cost and the wages that you can earn. Um, Essentially, it's just the fact that like it has essentially driven what is the disparity that we face nowadays. Was it designed to do that? I don't think so. He might be right on that, but I also feel like we also have this thing where like we probably didn't account for certain things happening. Like I don't want to say like overpopulation because obviously we can kind of correct that a little bit by at least building more houses to lower the cost of certain homes. But it's just the fact that like you have to understand that when you're essentially man, this is a really hard concept, but it's basically just like I don't think like the actual economy of our country was built so people will have a population collapse. I think it's just unforeseen events and then things that have obviously been put into play. Like I can honestly admit a little bit of the greed probably got a little bit too greedy, whether it's corporate or it's just people in general, and that has definitely caused a big like disparity in the differences between people and their ability to afford things, but then also their ability to live a life that has more of a hope in it to afford these things, acquire these things, and then also be able to have them for their own generational wealth. But we also have to take into consideration that there are many other things too. Like if you have someone that basically chooses not to get a good career or job, or maybe if they don't have that kind of luck but they still didn't do like certain things in order to progress themselves forward, we also have to understand that there are people out there that don't take the opportunities that they're given. So while I understand what he means, and I'm not putting the blame on people at all, I am saying that there's such a disparity between people that just don't want to do certain things in order to advance, that like you kind of have this weird ratio where it's like people are choosing not to do this so they can get ahead, and then some people are choosing, or they're choosing but they're not able to, which then leads them down another path of basically not being able to. So it's kind of a hard mix of things. I don't think it's just one concrete thing where it's been designed to do that. I think if anything, it's been designed to also help you in ways, depending on how you utilize it, your position, and then also your ability to actually take what you're given and turn it into something. But at the end of the day, it is a lot harder now. So I can also see how even if you go at that and you try your hardest, sometimes that can also still end up falling flat. But I'm like 50-50 on his last statement there. I do think it is designed to help, but I can see how it also has its holes, which has led to a population collapse. So if you guys have any thoughts about it, leave your thoughts in the comment. I'm personally going to leave it here because I think that we are landing on the almost 50-minute mark. This was the first long form video that I wanted to react to, but also if you've noticed, I've posted like a couple of videos today. One was the channel update video, the other was the Nintendo Switch reaction, just to give you guys a little bit of a gauge as to what I'm going for in terms of what I'll be uploading and reacting to. I think the main thing, like I said, is I want variety in my channel. So kind of like a Penguin Zero or even Asmongold kind of format where like we can basically pick whatever we want to react to. And that could be anything from like I guess you could say politics to world topics to, for me, as you can see by the wall, anime, animation, just anything really. But I really want to grow this channel and enjoy talking to you guys about what I find interesting, and maybe having like dialogue to the point where maybe I can learn something new, or maybe you can, or anything like that really. But at the end of the day, this was a very cool video to react to. I think that this was a very good one because I personally don't think Gen Z is lazy. I think some people in general are lazy, and I think because of that, it kind of draws this disparity of, oh, let's blame it on the younger people because they aren't able to get these certain things. But we also have to ask, why can't they get these certain things? So I don't think the Gen Z is lazy by any means. I think everybody in this world is trying the best that they can, depending on the situation and their goals. And I think at the end of the day, we kind of just have to, weather the storm, whether things get better, things stay the way they are, and just look for ways to basically make our situation better. So if you're out there, please leave a comment below. Maybe you can help somebody out that's going through a tough time, or maybe if you have some advice for me or anything like that personally, I'd definitely love to hear it, and we'll definitely reach out and reply to your comment and everything like that. But at the end of the day, this was very cool. We will probably pick up again sometime tomorrow with another video. And yeah, guys, thank you for coming through. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.